Azure infrastructure solutions, where we are going to talk about how we can get our journey started as an architect with Azure. Okay, before we get started, let me just quickly run you through my interaction, and then we will just introduce ourselves to the class, learn about your expectations, experience, and then we go forward. Okay, so my name is Mohammed Habib Hussain. I'm working for a team called Microsoft Worldwide Learning, which is responsible for the program ESI, Enterprise Skills Initiative, because of which you guys are nominated to this training program, right? You guys can call me Habib. So I'm stationed in Singapore. I primarily take care of all the infra and security courses. Okay, this is my forte, my specialization, I would say. Now, slowly I'm moving towards data because these days everybody talks about AI, and then AI needs to deal with your data. So I'm trying my luck with data, starting with NoSQL. So let's see how it goes in near future. So this is my email address. I will share this again in the chat box. So going forward, if you have any questions that you're shy to ask me here, you can either private message me or you can drop me an email at this email address. Okay. So my current role is a Microsoft technical trainer. Uh, so I deliver trainings on Azure. Okay. Before working for Microsoft, I was with HP for 3 years. Then moved to Dell for about 11 months, and then VMware for almost 11 years. Right. So 3 here, 11 months here, and then 11 years here. So Microsoft is my fourth company. I've done many industry standard certifications, including your CK and CK80, just to get my hands dirty on the DevOps side of things. Okay, so that's pretty much about me. So for your introduction, I have about 11 people in the room. What we'll do is we will make it a fun way. So I'm going to bring up a quick chart, a scanner, QR code for you guys. You can use your mobile phone to scan it, or you guys can just click on the link in the chat box. Okay, so we will use these links or the QR code to self-introduce. There are a few questions which I have posted in that exercise in Classroom. So this is how it would look like. If I were to be a participant, if I copy paste that link, it will bring me to this page, and then it will ask me for my name. So let's say I'm Happy, right? I've read, understood, and agree with the end user terms agreement. So just accept that. And then the first question which I've asked is, how are you feeling today? Just click on it and then share your responses. Okay. The first question was, how are you feeling today? The second question, once you have typed it in, the second question would be, where in the world are you right now? So which part of the world are you connecting us from? Okay. Just scan this QR code or click on the link in the chat box to share your comments. Meanwhile, let me fix it up a few things for you. So this is how the screen should look like, where you have a box to express yourself. Mark says he's doing great. That's good. If I say excited, next question is, where am I joining us from? So I'll just type Singapore, post it. What are your hobbies? What is your job role? Your course expectation. So these are the follow-up questions. Just give me some answers there. That would kind of give me a quick understanding about the participants who are joining me today. I'm looking into a few responses flowing in. If you know when Azure was formally released, you can post your answer. I have 12 responses. A few questions, I have 8. I'm looking into the responses now. Manoj says doing good. So what we are doing right now for people who have just joined in, we are just going through the introduce yourself chapter, wherein I want to know details like your name, your role, your experience with Azure, and your expectations for this particular course. Want to participate in that? If you have just joined us, please click on this link, which I've posted in the chat box now, or scan this QR code. So this is the one. Scan the QR code or click on the link in the chat box. That would give us your details about you. This generally would help me to create a kind of baseline for this training program. So I can see the responses here. So if you have just joined us, please scan this QR code or click on the link in the chat. No worries, Richard. Have you worked on any other platforms? Have you worked on any other cloud platforms, or is cloud completely new to you? Because generally speaking, the path for learning is AWS. Okay, wonderful. If you have AWS experience, Azure is going to be easy because the concepts don't change. The definition for cloud doesn't change. The use cases for cloud doesn't change. It's just the provider which is changing. And then if you see, there are many services which are like apple to apple comparison, right? For example, whatever you call there as EC2 instance is a virtual machine here. Whatever you call as a VPC is a VNet here, right? So there are a few things. So meanwhile, while we wait for the responses, let me just give you a quick document which helps compare Azure and AWS services. This link is from Microsoft, which talks about the quick comparison between AWS and Azure services. So if you have worked on certain services in AWS, please do share your knowledge there. I mean, compare it, and then that would give you a quick understanding. Let's see, 15 participants have shared their inputs in Classroom. Others, if you have not been able to manage to share your details, just scan this QR code or click on the link in the chat box. That will give me information. Okay. So, thank you so much for your participation. Got a total of 64 responses from 16, I mean from 15 people. About 42% of the people in the training confirmed that they have attended or completed the AZ-900 training. 25% says they work on an average every day on Azure, and 25% says, hey, I have some knowledge on cloud. Okay. So 50, I mean, now the percentage has increased to 50 for AZ-900. And when I look into the job role, most of the jobs, if you see here on screen, are like DevOps, architect, security engineer, cloud specialist. So all these are the things which I generally see whenever we are talking about your cloud. I mean, to the question number two. And then when we have looked into hobbies, mountain biking, astronomy, wow, cricket, I'm sure there's nothing from my Indian friends. Adventure, badminton, cooking, fighter, wow. I did join what do you call it, Aikido classes here in Singapore. Um, Enjoyed my shoulder, and I've decided, hey, Aikido is not something for me. But yeah, I love to keep myself busy with something. So these days I'm just hitting my hit classes. So we have people joining us from India, Malaysia, Australia, Singapore. Babu, hey, um, so I mean Southeast Asia. So for my Australian friends, if I'm not wrong, it's all, I mean, depending upon which part of Australia you are in, if you're from New South Wales or Victoria, I think it's almost your lunchtime. So feel free to grab a bite while you're um, listening to the lecture as well as actively participating. Okay. So when we talk about the course expectations, primarily everybody is talking about, hey, how do I prepare for AZ-305? How do I learn the tips and tricks which I needed to become a good architect? How do I prepare for my exam? So these are the more common things which everybody wanted to achieve. And then, yeah, doing great, doing good, excited. were the quick questions. So I just wanted to know if everybody is joining us from Asia region or anybody coming from the other side of the world. Sometimes we see people from US, Canada, and as well as from the South America region. So luckily we don't have anybody from that part of the world, so we are good. So all the breaks are aligned with Singapore time zone. All the breaks are aligned with Singapore time zone. The first break will be around 10:30 a.m. The lunch break is from 12 to 13 hours. And then most of the case studies we start after 1400, which is 2 p.m. Okay, so thank you so much. Let's get going. So this particular slide here talks about the roles and responsibilities of a solution architect. So if you want to become a solution architect, you must have level 200 knowledge on many things. So level 200 knowledge is a must on many things. What are these many things that I should be having knowledge on? So typically in a data center, what are the common things that you would see? So you would see compute, which is where you have your CPU memory coming into play. You will see your networks, you will see your storage, and you will see your applications, which is where components of your application, including database, comes into play. So that's exactly what we are highlighting on screen. Hey, you must have working knowledge of networking technologies, not limited to connectivity services, application delivery, and your network architectures. What do you mean by connectivity services? So like I just said earlier, whenever we are talking about connecting, we are talking about VNets, virtual networks. Now, how do I segment this virtual network? This is where we are talking about subnets, your firewalls, right? And then whenever we are talking about application delivery, we are talking about load balancers. Hey, what are the different types of load balancers that we have? So basically what we're trying to highlight here is you must have your knowledge across all the aspects of your typical data center. So that's your first point. Then second point, remember compute. So whenever we talk about compute, the first thing which comes into picture is virtual machines. Hey, but am I limited to virtual machines? Not really, right? Virtual machines come under infrastructure as a service offering. What if I need platform as a service offering? What if I want to go with containers, which is also available to you as a platform as a service offering? The answer is yes, you can. What if I want to go run my batch solution? Again, a computer is not just limited to virtual machines or containers, right? Or web applications. You have a lot of options available there. That's what we're gonna talk. Again, a high-level overview on all these solutions is gonna help you design a better solution for your customers. And then working knowledge on storage technologies. Whenever we talk about storage, the first thing that I want you to understand is, hey, what are the different types of storage? Because this question is relevant even if it's a non-cloud environment, even for on-premise. So if you typically see, you would see storage solutions from vendors like EMC, right? NetApp, then you have HP, then you have Fujitsu. I can go on. So what are they offering? EMC is known for their block storage solutions, right? NetApp is known for their file type of storage. HP is known for its 3PA, which is where we are talking about your object storage solution. So block, file, object. These are the different types of storage solutions which are available, right? Fujitsu again offering you block as well as file level storage solution. So I'm not saying EMC doesn't offer file level, but we all know for the fact that when we look into the solution providers, who stands where. So what I'm trying to highlight here is a good level 200 knowledge on the type of storage technologies, and then this is where your relational versus irrational, non-relational data storage solution comes into picture. So what do you mean by relational? What do you mean by non-relational? So relational is where we are talking about something that we can keep in rows and columns. This is where your Microsoft SQL comes into play. Non-relational data solutions. This is where we are talking about your NoSQL solutions. We will talk about this. So day one is all about governance and compute in AZ-305, right? So day one, we are not going to look into it. Day two is about storage. Day three is about your application. Day four is about your networks. So this is how we have divided our topics for this training program. So what is needed from you? Experience architecting solutions, including security, migration, and business continuity. So whenever we talk about business continuity, we're talking about solutions like BCDR, disaster recoveries. It could be anything. For example, if you have worked with VMware, you can look into solutions like SRM, Site Recovery Manager, or Veeam, backup solution provider, also has a disaster recovery solution. No matter which vendor you go to, the overall steps that you would conclude in order to protect your environment doesn't change. So, in simple terms, as a cloud solution architect, you must be an SME in designing cloud and hybrid solution. What do you mean by hybrid? Wherever you have an on-premise environment which is being extended to cloud. So this is hybrid, including compute, network, and storage. Application services, not limited to data solutions, monitoring, and security. Just give me a thumbs up if you are all following me so far with the roles and responsibilities. Thank you. Thanks, Vijay. Thanks, Fred. Thanks, Babita. Now, let me pause here for a quick second and let me ask this question, right? Before we go forward, let me ask this question. The question is, why are you moving to cloud? Why are you moving your applications to cloud? When we say moving to cloud, we're talking about applications to cloud. In Southeast Asia, like in India, we have Ola, right? We have Uber. In Southeast Asia, we have a company called Grab, which offers ride-hailing services, right? Which offers other services as well, like courier, food, delivery, everything. Shopping as well these days. Now, why am I talking about this company? This company runs on Azure, right? So similarly, you're here for this training program because you want to deploy your solutions in Azure. And whenever we talk about solution or development, we are just referring to your applications. So what's your reason? Why are you moving your application to Azure? This could be an industry standard question as well. Why do you want to move your applications to cloud? Right? When you already have an on-premise setup where you have your own compute, storage, network, and other integrated services, why cloud? You can share your answers in the chat, or you can unmute your line and speak up. More productivity, I agree. Now, productivity here, how am I increasing productivity? By making it flexible and by making it agile. What do you mean by agile? Speed with which I can make things done. Think about a typical on-premise environment. If I want to go ahead and deploy an application, step 1, buy a server. Step 2, buy an operating system. Step 3, configure your network and storage. Step 4, install operating system, configure your application runtime environment, and run your application. So if you see, there are plethora of steps that you are performing, right? So what I'm trying to highlight here is cloud makes it easy. Cloud hides complexity. All those answers are right. Quicker to go to market, exactly, Vijay. Agility, right? High availability, low latency, less capex. Yep, exactly. Typically, again, if you want to set up a data center, you have to have money, right? If I'm a startup company like Grab, which was once a startup company, I don't have initial money to set up big data centers, right? To buy big servers, to manage them. However, when I talk about cloud, everything is on demand over the internet, right? So all those answers are right. Reduce the bottlenecks with on-prem with respect to deployment speeds. Yeah, I agree. I can automate things. So I can bring things like Azure Blueprints. I can bring things like Biceps or even third-party tools like Terraform to automate my deployments to go with declarative approach rather than going with imperative. So there are multiple ways to do this, right? So all your answers are right. So what I have here for you is I was teaching AZ-305 last week, so I just copied a few of the things, especially the whiteboard, and your answers are all here. Check this out. Why are we moving our application to the cloud? Which means when you have something on premise, why are you getting them onboarded to cloud. Agility, speed with which I can make things done. Cost is definitely a factor. Why? Because I can control what kind of resources I want to deploy, and I'm paying only for the resources that I deploy. That's why, if you look at the definition for cloud, so if you look at the simple definition for cloud, cloud has always been on demand delivery of IT services over the internet with pay-as-you-go model. Does this make sense? So that's where the cost factor comes into the picture. And choice is yours. With respect to compute, like I said, I'm not limiting you to just use virtual machines, or I'm not saying just go for containers. We have ACI, we have AKS, we have Azure Batch, we have what do you call it? Integration with OpenShift. So there are multiple different options available for you to explore, right? So the choice is yours. And within virtual machines, hey, are you trying to run a database? Okay, go with E series. Are you trying to run a graphic intensive workload like a gaming application? Go with N series. Are you trying to run a big database like SAP HANA? Go with high compute workloads, HPC, H series, right? So choice is given to the customer. That's the CFA, right? E is efficiency. This is where we are talking about less wastage of resources. S here is for scalability, which means auto scaling capabilities are integrated with your cloud. Another S here is for security, which is where we are talking about it's a shared responsibility model. Anything in the cloud, you have to take care of it. Anything off the cloud, you have to leave it to the provider. For example, the physical security of the data centers. I'm sure you have seen those James Bond or Mission Impossible movies where you will see how the physical data centers are secured and how it is restricted, right? So that's taken care by Microsoft. But anything inside, which means creating a VPC, configuring a firewall, configuring your segments, configuring NSGs, deploying your workloads, configuring policies, all this is your job, right? So that's why security is a shared responsibility model. Stands for high availability, which is where the term resiliency comes into play. So all these are the reasons which are mentioned in the chat. I agree with what Manoj is saying. Fully baked, best-in-class, industry-certified, and compliant solutions. Yep, it makes it easy for me to choose a solution depending upon the industry vertical I belong to. For example, banking versus hospitals, right? Wonderful. Any questions here, guys? Everybody good so far? Just give me a thumbs up if you're following me. Thanks, Vijay. Thanks, Roshan. Thanks, Mark. Thanks, Jacqueline. So Jacqueline is a very famous star here in India. She is from Sri Lanka, though. I don't know. Somehow you remind me of her. So beautiful name. So now coming back to the deck. So like I said earlier, people follow a particular learning path before they come to this training, right? They start with 900, which is known as fundamental. Then they go with AZ-104, which is associate level, AZ-104. Then they come to 305, which is an expert level. Okay, I never did this in the last 6 years of experience with Azure. I've never done my fundamental training. I started my journey with AZ-104. AZ-104 is like a must to go for AZ-305. So that's why one of the questions which we asked was, hey, have you attended at least an AZ-900 training when we went through the Klaxoon thing, right? So if you have not, you are not. It's not a mandatory thing, but it is good to have information, right? So as long as you have some experience on some cloud platform, whether it is AWS, GCP, or other vendors, I'm happy because the definition doesn't change, the offerings don't change, and then the use cases don't change, right? So what I'm trying to highlight here is if you have AZ-104 certification, that's good. If you don't have, you must target for the certification first before you go to 305. So this is the learning path. which we would apply to our AZ-305. Now, AZ-305 study guide, which is also known as the exam blueprint. So on fourth day, I will walk you through it. So when you look into the exam blueprint, you will see these four sections to prepare for your exam, right? So identity governance and monitoring solutions, storage, business continuity, infrastructure. So each section is having a weightage. Higher the percentage, you will likely see more questions from that particular study area. So, for example, if I'm talking about networks, hey, where does network come into play? It comes into the infrastructure solutions, okay? Infrastructure, not limited to network, it could be your compute as well, right? So, 25 to 30% of the questions. Data storage solution, both relational and non-relational. When we say relational and non-relational, we are talking about both um, object block file level storage solutions versus your databases. You will get about 25 to 30% of the questions from there. Then we are talking about your IAM, which is where identity comes into play. Then we are talking about Azure policies. We are talking about RBAC, which is where your governance comes into play. Then we are talking about Azure Monitor, so which is your monitoring solution, along with your log analytical workspaces. So you will get questions on all these fronts in your exam. On last day, day 4, we will talk about how you can redeem your free voucher, 50% discount voucher for the exam, and then how other things work. So we're going to look into that. Okay. And then as per the training, so this is how we are going to divide the content, day 1, day 2, day 3, and day 4. So all these 4 days, we are going to cover all the topics. Like I said, day 1 is all about governance and compute. These are the two topics which we're going to cover. Approximately, it will be 1400 hours, which means 2 p.m. Singapore time. By 10, we'll be done with our discussions and the lecture, after which it's going to be a case study. Case study, we're going to do it in groups. Depending upon the number of audience, we will either go with a single group or we will divide ourselves into multiple groups for those case study discussions. No labs whatsoever in AZ-305. There is no follow the book instruction set given to you and perform those steps in the portal. If you want to do something like that, AZ-104 is the training for you, right? Day 2 has always been about storage. So we are going to talk about non-relational storage solutions versus relational storage, which is where we are going to talk about your storage accounts here. And then here we're going to talk about your database offerings. Data integration is other solutions, which is where we're going to talk about, hey, what other analytical solutions available to you that can be integrated with storage, which is where we're going to talk about solutions like Databricks versus your data lake, Azure Synapse. So how are these going to get integrated? All that thing is what we're going to cover on day 2. Day 3 is completely about applications and your IAM along with a little bit of monitoring. So that's your day 3. So application architecture, Azure Active Directory, Azure Monitor. Day 4 is all about networking. So we will talk about networks, BCDR, and tools available for you to get started with your migration projects. So these are the things we're going to cover. We can adjust the modules as needed, but most of the time, from my experience, we were able to stick to these modules as per the days nominated, and it went well for all of us. And then this is the link where you can find student materials. This should have been emailed to you. However, let me just quickly grab a link for you and then I can share it with you so that you can bookmark this link and then review your training content once you're done with this training. Okay. So just refresh this page. We're talking about 305. Here it is. So bookmark the link which I've given in the chat box. I'm gonna add that link to your whiteboard as well so that you have it when you're reviewing it. I will share the whiteboard every day end so that you can use it for the reviewing purposes once we are done with the training program. Okay, I've already added it. So when you go back to that link, this is what you will see. Governance. So what do you mean by governance? We're going to talk about what is Azure policies. We're going to talk about what are the 4 levels of hierarchies where we're going to apply the policies. We're going to talk about RBAP. We're going to talk about tags. All that is available here. So if you go designing governance, we will talk about management groups, subscription resource groups, resources, Azure policies, RBAP, and blueprints. This is our module number 1. Similarly, when we talk about compute solution, we're going to talk about virtual machines. We're going to talk a little bit on containers. We're going to talk about web applications. We're going to look into what Azure Batch services are. Again, a quick high-level introduction to all these services, right? If you want to learn more extensively about the services, we cover virtual machines, containers, and where is that other thing? Not logic apps, but web applications in AZ-104, right? Training program. Similarly, we have BP204 where we talk extensively on Kubernetes, Azure Functions and Logic Apps. So each different training offers different compute solutions. So what I'm trying to highlight here is from this link that you have bookmarked, you can look into all the modules that we have for your training program. So if you remember, I told you compute and governance will be our day 1 content. Day 2 content is all going to be storage. So that's what you have here. Day 3 is all about your application IAM and monitoring. Day 4 is about your networks. Just give me a thumbs up if you're following me so far, people. You will hear from me this statement time and again. So please make use of the reaction buttons. Top right corner, click on the smiley button, then give me a thumbs up. Thank you. So this is the link that I've just given you, where you can click on that particular module and then self-study if needed. When you go to the learning path, I mean the MS Learn page, at the bottom right corner of the page, if you run into any problem, you have the option to share your feedback by clicking on the button reporting an issue. When you do this, you will have these radio buttons available, right? So depending upon the feedback section that matches the best for your current requirement, you can select that and then you can provide your feedback. And then how are we going to prepare for this particular training? So you would be acting like a solution architect who have been hired to help a company by name Tailwind Traders, who's modernizing their infrastructure and moving their applications to the cloud. So you have been asked to recommend and suggest new cloud architectures, which means you will take up a role of an architect, and then you will, every time and again, like I said, we will give you a case study. You will work alone or with your teammates, and then you will come up with a solution. That's what we're going to do. There is no hands-on lab for this particular training program. Understand that. And then we're going to talk about requirements and tasks provided in the case study. So requirements are something which must be met. Tasks are something through which you meet your requirements, right? Proactively participate in small groups or individually. And then as an architect, you must have access to these links. What is an Azure Architecture Center? So let me just give you a simple example. Let's say you are an architect and you want to design a solution for a startup company. You don't know where to go, what to do, what to ask, right? So you just go to Azure Architecture Center, click on the first link. So this is like a landing page for architects. So any solution that you want to design, we have documentation for that solution. So now here, I'll just control that and then I'll start with startups. Here, architecture for startups, scenarios, right? AWS service comparison. This is the link which I've given you. Let me copy this link again to the whiteboard so that I don't forget that. So this is the link for the training material, which I've already posted. I'll just write it down here. Hold on, it's done. Okay, it's done. So, learning path. AZ-305. And then on the right, let's paste that link. This one here is AWS to Azure comparison. So this is what we have. So anything and everything is available to you from here. Let's say you want to explore solutions. So let's say you want to go with HPC. So, or you want to go with a video rendering service that you want to run on a HPC workflow. So anything and everything is available to you from this particular page. So this should be like your home page whenever we talk about your go-to thing for any of the essential scenarios or choosing the right stuff for your requirements, right? If you want to just explore the cloud best practices, click on it. That will talk about, hey, what are the application architecture fundamentals and how you should get started with your design. What choices, what principles, what patterns, what best practices to implement, all that available to you here. And then what was that I wanted to show you here? Hold on. Then we are talking about different types of architectures. So depending upon the solution, depending upon the requirements, you can look into these architectures for reference, and you can use these architectures in your design, right? So all that available to you in one place. So this is your architecture center. The next thing is documentation. Anything and everything. For example, we're talking about compute, right? Compute service, Azure. So it will say choose an Azure Compute Service. If you remember, we did mention these terms: virtual machines, Azure Batch, functions, web application services, ACI, AKS, other different solutions. So this becomes your starting point. So what I'm trying to highlight here is learn.microsoft.com, which is knowledge base dump yard, should be the second link which you should be aware of. And then the third thing is Azure Charts. What is Azure Charts? Most of the time, agree or not, customers would want to know the pricing factor, right? Okay, how much it's going to cost me? This is one of the common questions that you would receive, right? And depending upon budget, which can be a constraint for your design, you have to choose solution. You have to choose the right region, right? So it becomes more sense for me to go to this particular page to understand which services are available to me in which region. For example, I can just say, friends from Australia, right? We have Australia, one in Canberra. The other region available to us is in Victoria and then New South Wales, right? So if I go Australia, scroll up, Australia Central, most of the time when we say Australia Central, it's the central administrative space, which is Canberra, which comes into play. So it clearly talks about the different types of services. So if I click on load balancers like traffic manager, it clearly tells me how much it's going to cost me, where I'm going to deploy it, everything in one place. So this is what we have. So your Azure Charts is one of those places that you should go primarily to understand the use cases, customer stories, different type of solution explorers, templates available for you to just run through. Where was I? We were here. So this is Microsoft's Cloud Adoption Framework. But before we talk about this framework, let's take a step back. Let me ask you this question. Hey, if you were to be an architect, I mean, you don't have to be an architect to design something, right? But typically, because you all are here to become an architect, what are the stages that a solution has to go through? For example, you want to build a home. Now, what are the stages that you would go through in order to build a home? So just take about 5 minutes of time here and then come up with a solution and then let me know those stages that you would think of when we are talking about your uh, building house activity. So I'm just gonna hide that particular cloud adoption framework. And I want you to answer this question for me, then we go forward. I'm just gonna look into the answers in the chat box here. Okay, Lincoln says, I've attended an AZ-500 and cleared it. How much of an overlap will be there? AZ-500 is a mixture of three training programs: AZ-104, SC-300, and SC-200, right? Those things are gonna helpful to you when you are going through the AZ-305. But yeah, content-wise, there is an overlap. For example, in an AZ-500, you would have talked about policies. We are going to talk about policies here as well. We would have talked about RBAC. We are going to talk about RBAC because in an AZ-500, you would be taking up the approach from the security administrator point of view. For example, the first thing that you would have learned is something called difference in depth, right? Which is where you would bring up all the layers. Physical identity. When identity came, you would have talked about your IAM. So day three, when we're going to talk about applications and IAM, we are going to look into it. So there will be an overlap. Okay, I won't say there won't be, because at the end, you're designing a cloud solution which is incorporated of all these things. Hope that helps, Lincoln. But the approach that you're going to take is completely different for AZ-305. No hands-on lab training exercises like AZ-104 or AZ-500. We don't give you a guide, we don't give you a lab VM, we don't give anything. It's all a case study, group discussion, and a solution. Vijay says, hey, if I'm planning to design, I have to first go through the requirement stage, design stage, implement stage, monitor and improvement stage. Wonderful. I really like that. How about others? Specifics to house, okay, requirement gathering, blueprint, proposal, costing, building, and maintenance. Wonderful. Although, I mean, if you see the answer from Vijay and Manoj, they are closely related, right? So, stage one is collecting requirements. This doesn't change, right? No matter what you're trying to highlight, stage one is always to collect your requirements. Talk to the customer, post your questions. For example, if I'm an architect and you come to me saying that you want to build a home, my first question would be, hey, how big is the surface area? And then how big do you want to construct the house? How many people are going to live? How many bedrooms? How many toilets? How many kitchens? Do you need extra amenities like gym or a swimming pool or a sauna, right? So I'm going to post all these different kind of questions at you. I'm going to collect that information and then I'm going to come up with a solution. So stage one is requirement. And then Vijay says, hey, I might also use assessment tools. Definitely. When we are talking about um, on-premise to cloud migrations, definitely I have to understand whether my workloads are ready to be migrated or not. So, for example, in case of applications, we would rely on something called ADFS activity report, or you would also rely on a CASB solution, which is like a cloud access security broker, which in our case is Microsoft Defender for Cloud. So all those answers are correct. So stage one is collecting requirements. Stage two is where we are going to bring in design. So this is where the term blueprints comes into play. Whatever you have collected the information, you're going to bring this information to the paper, right? So this is what we are saying. Design is a stage where we make things done with regards to your requirements. So your design must meet your requirements. And then design is of multiple stages. Again, I don't want to go into the nitty and gritty factors, but in simple terms, stage two is design. Stage three is building, which is where the term deploy generally comes into picture. We start building things. So stage three is deploy. So as you can see from Vijay's point, it says implementation. Implementation is nothing but deployment, right? Implementing means doing something. So that's why I said start building things. So stage three doesn't change. Stage four is where we talk about delivery, right? Which means handover. But before we go through the handover, we go with multiple questions. But the simplest question that we'll always consider is, hey, have I met the requirements? Because if you haven't met the requirements, then your solution is not complete, which means you haven't moved forward. So if you go back to the whiteboard, that's exactly what I have on screen for you. When we talk about design, stage one is to collect requirements, which is basically assess your environment, right? So understand the objectives of the customer, clear assumptions, constraints, and risk factors. What do you mean by assumptions? Um, Something with respect to budgets. Don't assume. Understand how much is the budget. What is the budget, right? Constraints are like speed breakers. Let's say, for example, don't assume things that they are prepared for disaster recovery configuration. Because when we say disaster recovery, what's the second side? What is it going to be, right? Let's say it's between your on-premise and the cloud. So what's the requirement of the network for disaster recovery? Hey, am I meeting that minimum requirement? So rather than assuming, clarify it. In this scenario, where I've given you an example of a disaster recovery solution, a constraint could be a network bandwidth. Right? You have to resolve your constraints before you proceed forward. And then risk factor, same thing. In the disaster recovery, the risk factor can be with regards to replication, right? While I'm replicating my data from site A to site B, hey, is it going to encrypt the data? Because this replication can happen over a private line or a public line. So what are the risk factors? So things like that must be answered. Just give me a thumbs up if you're following me for stage one. Stage one has always been about collecting the requirements. So if you want to build a home, if you go to an architect, the architect would ask you different types of questions like how many bedrooms you want, how big is the surface area, how many floors do you want, what amenities do you want to include. Depending upon the information that you have provided, he would go forward. That's your stage one. Stage two is where we are talking about designing. So this is where the term blueprint comes into play. Your blueprint must meet your requirements. Again, like I said, in design phase, there are multiple. So, for example, there is something called conceptual design, which is like an elevator pitch, right? It just has to be a block diagram. Then there is something called logical design, where you bring in more things to the whiteboard, wherein you're designing a solution and including the component details. And then there is something called physical design, which is like an Excel sheet, where you have the complete in-depth information, like, hey, what should be the IP address, what should be the kind of reservation size to go with, what should be the load balancer, public IP address, all this kind of details. That's your physical design. So that's why I said design itself has multiple different stages, right? Keep in mind, stage one and stage two are iterative processes, which means anything in stage one changes, stage two also changes. That's why I've included that red color line. Stage three has always been about deploying, which means implementing, which means start building things, putting things into action. Stage four is deliver, which is where we're going to validate, test it, and then conclude if we have meet the requirements. I want you all to digest this information from the chat boxes. Thanks for the responses and from this diagram. And let me know if you have any questions. Everybody good so far? Thank you, Vijay. Now that we are done understanding the basics of designing, let's talk about how Microsoft brings the design into play. So Microsoft, what it says is, hey, I have a framework whenever you're trying to design something. Okay, what is that framework? Stage one is to define strategy, which is nothing but understand your customer, understand the business objectives, understand the justification which business is offering, and then prioritize the project. This is your stage one. Stage two, once you have selected the details, what are we doing? We are going to design. That's where planning comes into play. So configure your digital estate, initial organization alignment, skill readiness plan, cloud adoption plan. So all these things come into stage two. What is stage two? Stage two is design. Stage three is building things, implementation. This is where we are bringing in your ready or adopt stage. What do you mean by ready stage? Hey, do you configure your landing zones? What do you mean by landing zone? In Azure, landing zone means a group of subscriptions bringing together environment for you to deploy your resources with ease. Environment where automation and orchestration are the must-have things. So this is where we are talking about the landing zone, expanding the landing zone, implementing the best practices. So when we are talking about adopt, we are not creating anything, we are just moving stuff. For example, like I said earlier, if my application is cloud native and if it can be migrated with minimal changes to the application, so that's where the migrate comes into play. What if I need to refactor my application for cloud? That's where the innovate part comes into play. So depending upon your application, whether it is cloud native or not, you will either migrate it or innovate it. Now, in all these stages, we are going to govern, which means we are going to go with the least privilege access best practice, which is also part of your zero trust. If you look into the security aspects, I've used the term defense in depth earlier, and now I'm using the term zero trust. What is zero trust? Three principles is what we go with. Verify always, which means our user must authenticate and get authorized no matter where he is connecting from. Trust but verify, that's what we call it. That's principle number one. Principle number two is least privilege, which means, hey, don't give more authorization than what he requires. So go with JIT and JEA, just in time and just enough access. And principle number three is assume breach, which means segment your environment so that tomorrow, even if your environment is compromised, there is no lateral flow within your environment. So I'm just going to pause here. I'm going to ask the same question. Any questions? So far, so good, people. Everybody understanding where your cloud adoption framework is coming from? More details about cloud adoption framework is available to you here. What is a landing zone? Like I said, landing zone is a group of subscriptions. For example, let me just take a step back here. Okay, let me just come back to this page. Now, the first question that you should ask is, hey, what will I get when I register for cloud? So before I answer question from Vijay about landing zone, let me ask this question to the guys who have worked on Azure, because about 50% of the people have attended AZ-900, and then most of you guys are also certified. So my question to you is, what will I get when I register for Azure Cloud? Because if you see my screen, whenever I log in, I launch this portal, portal.azure.com. The first thing it will ask is a username and a password, right? So let me log in with an account. And then I would be welcome to the home screen. And from the home screen, I can deploy all the resources that I want. So the answer is absolutely right, what Manoj says. So when you register for cloud, what you get is an Azure Active Directory, which is a tenant, because this account that you see on the top right corner, see here, Contoso. What is that Contoso? So if you go search for Azure Active Directory, under overview, you will see the same name. See here, name, Contoso, overview tab. So basically what you're going to get by default when you register, even for the free account, right? When you're going to go for Azure free one, you get one tenant, which is your Azure Active Directory, which offers your identity and access management solution, plus a subscription. What is a subscription? Without a subscription, I can't deploy a resource. Why? Check this out. I'm just going back to home. I'm searching for a virtual machine. I'm going to say create virtual machine, create Azure virtual machine. What is the first thing it's asking me? Subscription. So I go back home. This time I'm searching for virtual networks. I'll search for VNet, virtual networks. I want to create a new virtual network. What is the first thing it's asking? Subscription. Going back to home again, searching for storage accounts. clicking on create new storage account. What is the first question? Subscription again. So basically, the term subscription is how Azure will charge you. So subscription defines what resources are being deployed by you. Subscription acts like a logical boundary for all your resources that you're deploying. Okay, so what you get by default is one tenant plus a subscription. What is subscription? Subscription is for billing purpose. What is tenant? Your IAM, Identity and Access Management Solution. Why do I need billing? Because all your resources sit inside your subscription. Does this make sense? Everybody following me so far? Your subscription acts like your logical boundary for all your resources. Okay? Now that this statement is correct, now let's just bring up a browser and then let's search for Azure Landing Zone. A simpler statement is Azure Landing Zone is a group of subscriptions which allow you to provision your resources. See here? This is the thing. An Azure Landing Zone uses subscriptions to isolate and scale application resources and platform resources. So repeatability, which means Azure Landing Zones uses the concept of infrastructure as a code, which means it goes with the declarative approach with which it's going to provision an environment for you. So what kind of environment? See here, it's going to design 8 different areas for you. So if you look at this diagram, it brings all that information to you on screen. So it's going to isolate your management from your workloads, from your networks, from your testing environments. This is what we have. So if I'm not wrong, I should have that covered in my whiteboard for today's discussion. So if you go back to module 1, we haven't touched base on the module 1 yet. So if you scroll down, yeah, Azure Landing Zone, aka.ms/ALZ, Azure Landing Zone. So basically, in simple terms, an Azure Landing Zone is a group of subscriptions which allow you to take up a declarative approach to deploy an environment which isolates your security, management, and your workloads. Does that make sense, Vijay? Just give me a thumbs up if you're following me. Others following me so far? Understanding what Azure Landing Zone is? So let me just incorporate this link in the chat box for your reviewing purposes. Thank you. So, yep, more details about the landing zones are available to you in that whiteboard as well. I'll share this whiteboard with you in some time. So coming back to the deck, so what we have discussed so far is a cloud adoption framework. Now, why we are going to cloud? We already talked about it. Hey, for some, it is the lower capex or operational expenditure. For some, it is the efficiency. For some, it is the performance. For some, it is the high availability. For some, it is the security. No matter what your reason is, you can go to cloud. If you see, most of the organizations are either moving everything to the cloud from their data centers, or they are going with hybrid deployments, which means they will have both. For example, here in Singapore, one of the biggest banks is DBS, right? DBS has their own data center running within Singapore, as well as they are customers of Azure as well as AWS. So they, depending upon the project, depending upon the workload type, they have their own workloads running in the cloud. Does it make sense, everybody? So these are the reasons why one would implement a well-architected framework for any given solution on Azure. So that marks the end of presentation. Any questions? So that was a quick introduction what are we going to discuss for the next 4 days. Everybody good so far? Thank you. The next topic that we have here is governance. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about few topics through the whiteboard first. Uh, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about few topics through the whiteboard, like what do you mean by governance? What do you mean by management group? What do you mean by Azure subscription? What do you mean by resource groups? What are tags? Policies are that. We'll do a quick recap about these topics. Then we're going to hit the deck. Then we're going to talk about the points that you must think as an architect. Okay? So without any further delay, let me just bring up the deck here. Just hold on. So this is just to save time. Okay. Generally, I would have done this from the scratch, writing everything, because I just delivered this training. I had this good whiteboard, which I just wanted to use to save time. Okay. Generally, what do you mean by governance? Governance means some kind of control on the resources that you are deploying, right? So how am I going to control that? That's where you define something called permissions, which is where we bring in the term called RBAC, role-based access control. And whenever people talk about role-based access control, they talk about role assignment, which is bringing these things together. User a group, mapping it to a role for a given scope. The scope can be a management group, the scope can be a subscription, the scope can be a resource group, or the scope can be a resource itself. Okay, so that's what the control is all about. And then governance has also been about rules with which you define compliance, rules with which you implement your business standards, right? This is where we bring Azure policies. So, in simple terms, whenever you hear the term governance in Azure, it is Azure policy plus RBAC plus tags. I'm just going to pause here for 10 seconds. Let me know if you have any questions, guys. When will I implement governance in an organization? When you have multiple teams, when you have multiple subscriptions, when you have a requirement from regulatory compliance. For example, in Australia, the government says, hey, my data associated to my citizens should not leave my country, right? That's your GDPR. So I can create an Azure policy which enforces this rule, saying that, hey, whatever resources that you're deploying, it must be limited to this particular region only. I can do that. So I can only deploy the resources within that region. Any other region that I select, I will automatically get an error message. The validation check doesn't get passed. Give me a thumbs up if you're following me, people. Thank you. Let's check in. We have 18 in the room now. So where will I apply? So we have talked about Azure policies, we have talked about RBAC, right? The question is, where will I apply this governance? This is where you need to understand that you're going to apply at these 4 levels. So we have something called management group, we have subscription, we have resource group, and we have the resources itself. Before I jump into this discussion, raise your hand. Okay, there is a raise button on the top right corner. Click on that button. If this is the first time you're hearing these terms, management group, subscription, resource group, resource, don't feel shy. If you're completely new to Azure, you haven't heard these terms before, and if this is the first time that you're hearing to this, just let me know so that I can take a step back, talk a little bit more on basics, and then we can go forward. Okay? I have one person, Asru. Anybody else who is listening to these terms for the first time? What do you mean by management group, subscription, resource group, and a resource? Okay, no, only one person, that's fine. Now, for the sake of us, let's take a step back and let's talk about this. Asrul. So my question was, what will I get when I register for cloud? Now the question that you should have is, how do I register for cloud? Have you asked that question? How do I register for Azure? I'm just going to my browser, searching with the keyword Azure free. This is the link which allows you to register for cloud. Okay. Okay. We will talk about the term service principles. Okay. Service principles come into play whenever we are talking about having an identity for an application within a tenant. Okay. So we will talk about that on day 3. Hope that helps, Vijay. I just saw your question. Yeah. Thanks for the thumbs up. So coming back to Asrul. So Asrul, if you are somebody new to Azure and if you want to explore all the services which Azure has to offer, this is the place where you go. Azure.microsoft.com, English US free. So when you click on start free, it will ask you to register yourself. See here, Azure sign up. It will ask you some basic questions, a credit card information, and then you will go forward. In order to sign up, you must have a Microsoft account, which could be Gmail or Outlook account, right? You just have to register yourself. So when you register, what are you getting? You're getting two things. One, the tenant, and two, your subscription. This is for an individual. But wait a minute. What if I'm an enterprise, not an individual, right? If you are an enterprise, you will go through these steps. Scroll down. See here? I'll just paste this information. Enterprise people don't go to that website, free account website. Hold on. It's not allowing me to post it. Hold on, guys. 1 minute. Seriously. Okay, now it's posted. And then this is the KP article for the same. So for an enterprise, you will talk to something called account manager. That account manager will send you an email saying that, hey, here is an invitation for you to get started with Azure. And that email will give you a username and a password saying that, hey, this is your enterprise agreement portal, right? This is where you can log in with these credentials. And then these are the things that you would do in that, once you have got access to the EA portal. So if you see here, you would go to the website called ea.azure.com. You would log in with your account information shared by your account manager. The first thing that you would do is you will activate your enrollment. Okay. The second thing that you would do is you will create an enterprise administrator account. The account with which you have logged in will already be an enterprise account administrator, but you're going to create one. After this, you're going to start creating departments because as a company, you would have HR department, marketing department, and then you will have finance departments, right? You will create those departments. And then every department, you will create an account because if you want to manage their billing separately, these accounts come handy. And every account will have a subscription associated. So if you see here, for an individual, it was easy. Just go to the free page, register, give your credit card information, you get everything. But for an enterprise, you have to follow these 5 steps. Everybody, just give me a thumbs up if you're following me so far. The link for this is available to you. Okay, great. So now coming back to the whiteboard. So now that you understand how an enterprise gets it, so what do they do? Step 1. they have multiple subscriptions. Because I have multiple departments, multiple teams, right? That's what we saw. If you have multiple departments, you can go with multiple subscriptions. Now, let's say this is a company called Contoso, right? This company has HR, IT, marketing. And within IT, I have region 1, region 2. And within region, I have production, non-production. So if you see here, what am I doing? I'm trying to mimic organization structure. This is something similar to what we do with Active Directory domain services in on-premise. What do you do in Active Directory domain services? You have your domain, then you have your subdomain, then you have your security groups, then you have your OUs, then you have your objects. Sorry, OUs, security groups, and objects. Everybody following me? So the first thing which I'm trying to sell you is the term management group. What is a management group? A management group is just a logical container. A management group helps you mimic your organization structure. A management group purpose is to manage your subscriptions. That's it. Give me a thumbs up, Asru, if you're following me. Thank you. So that's exactly what I've written in the whiteboard. If you go back to day 1 section. See here? A management group is to mimic your organization structure. It's a logical folder to manage multiple subscriptions. That's it. How many management groups can I create? There is no limit. How many subscriptions can a management group hold? There is no limit. Okay? But what we say is a management group can be nested. That nesting should not be, the nesting depth should not be more than 6. The level of depth that we support, that's what I've written. See here, 6 level of depth for inheritance. For example, how do I define 6 levels of depth? If you scroll back here, Microsoft is a multinational company. I have offices in Americas, APAC, and EMEA. Within Americas, I have sales department. Under that, I have. So if you see here, this is my depth 1. 1. This is my depth 2. So Americas itself is a management group. Sales is again a management group, right? I'll write it down here for your reference. MG, MG. MG means management group. So if you see here, the level of depth is only 2. The max that we support is 6. On an average, you will only see 2 to 3 level of depth whenever we are talking about a large enterprise environment. So people, if you have access to your environments, to your portal, portal.azure.com, see here 6 levels of depth is maximum support. That's the diagram that I'm trying to show you. If you have access to your environments, what I want you to do is go back to your portal, portal.azure.com. Here, this is my portal, portal.azure.com. Go to home, search with the keyword management groups, and then check the hierarchy and let me know how many levels you have. Pratik is saying the company has its own Azure tenant and during journey the company has acquired other companies. Yep. Okay. When a company has acquired another company, you have the choice. Now, the first thing that you need to understand, Pratik, in Azure Active Directory, one directory is equal to one tenant only. Unlike ADDS, Active Directory Domain Services, wherein you can link directories, I can't do that here. I can do something called B2B, but I can't link them otherwise. I can't make 2 directories into one. Every directory is a separate tenant. So that's why the statement which we generally use in Azure Active Directory is one directory is equal to one organization is equal to one Azure Active Directory. I can have multiple directories. All I have to do is I have to go to manage section tenants and then bring it on. So if you go back here to my personal account. See here, Madeline. This is my personal account, not the one which is offered to me by Microsoft. So if you go here, click on this icon, manage tenants, I have these many tenants. Each tenant itself is a separate directory. If you want just a single directory, then you make provisions like Cloud Sync in order to move those accounts from one directory to another directory. Again, the concept of B2B, again, the concept of Azure AD Connect comes into play. I don't want to get into that, but yeah, just give me a thumbs up if that makes sense, Pratik. One directory is equal to one organization is equal to one Azure Active Directory or tenant, single tenant. Yeah, thank you. So coming back to our discussions, my question was, I paused here. My question was, I want you all to go to home, management groups, and let me know how many levels of depth do you see. See here, this is only one. Number one is test 104 and the tenant root group, and then I have my subscription. What I want to know is, how many levels of depth do you see? The max supported is 6, not more than that. On an average, in any organization, you will see 2 to 3. If it is 1, there is no need to be surprised. We will talk about it. When should I go with multiple levels of depth? When should I not? That's what we're going to do through the deck. What's the level of depth, guys? You tell me. What's the level of depth in your environment? Manoj says 2. How about others? We have 20 people in the room. Come on, people. It's Monday morning. And we are all in Asia, which means it's bright and sunny here in Singapore. I think Melbourne or Australian friends must be cold now. Vijay says 3. Astral says 2. Wonderful. Like I said, on an average, from my experience, I've seen only 2 to 3. Okay, but the max that you can go with is 6. Pratik also says 2. Wonderful. Thanks for those responses, guys. So if we come back here, we started with the definition for management group. What is management group? A management group is just a logical folder to manage your subscriptions. A management group mimics your organization structure. Keep in mind, there's a group called tenant root group. See here, tenant root group. This group can't be created by you, can't be deleted by you. This is by default available. Under this group, all your groups come into play. For example, under the tenant root group, I can create a group called Microsoft. Under Microsoft, I can create a group called Asia Pacific, Americas, and EMEA. Under Asia Pacific, I can create a group called Singapore. You're getting my point? Tenant root group is like the top level. Cannot be created by you, cannot be deleted by you. That's why I've written it in the red color. Now let's talk about subscriptions. We have already done that. Subscription is mainly for billing purpose. Subscription is the logical boundary for your resources. Why? No matter which resource you try to deploy, the first question it will always ask is, what's your subscription? That's exactly what we have done earlier. What's your subscription? Everybody following me? So a subscription is a logical boundary. What is a resource group? A resource group is a logical container to host all your resources. To host all your resources that share common life cycle. What do you mean by this? That share common life cycle. Think about a resource group as a logical container for all the components of your application. For example, let's say I have a banking application. Hold on. A banking application might have many things. Something on my screen, I thought it was on the whiteboard. Okay. A banking application, example, a banking application. A banking application will have many things. For example, it will have a firewall, it will have a front end. Sorry, before front end, I can bring in a load balancer. load balancer, a front end, a middleware, back end, network, and security. So basically, I can put all these things together in one resource group. So tomorrow, if I want to delete this application, I will just delete this resource group. Deleting that resource group will delete all the components, all that is associated with that application. Am I making sense, everybody? Following me? A resource group can also be created for a project. For example, I'm creating a new project. This project will have some virtual machines, some storage accounts, some databases deployed. I can keep all these things together. I can tag these objects with a new word called new project. So a resource group is just a logical container to host all your resources that share common life cycle. Now keep in mind, resource groups can't be nested. Resource groups can't be renamed. Resource groups are location specific. Three important points which I've just pointed out. Resource groups can't be nested. Resource groups are region specific. And what was the other one? Resource groups are can't be renamed. Can't be nested. Can't be renamed. Specific to the location. Give me a thumbs up if this hierarchy makes sense, Ashro. I would say attend AZ-104 to learn more of this and then to do hands-on. This is where we're going to take our first break. Once we come back, we'll talk a little bit more on subscriptions, landing zones, types of subscriptions, types of resource groups, tags, and then Azure policies. We're going to look into these things. So this is where we have paused our lecture now. So let me bring up a timer. So it's going to be a 15 minutes break. Scan that QR code that will bring up a timer on your mobile device. Okay, be back in 15. We will start where we have stopped from. Stepping away, guys. Thank you.